The first time Elias Voss saw the future, he was 9 years old and standing barefoot on the cracked linoleum of his grandmother's kitchen in late autumn. The room smelled of cinnamon, burnt sugar, and the faint metallic tang of old pennies. Outside, the Pennsylvania hills were bleeding red and gold, and the wind kept slapping wet leaves against the windowpanes like desperate hand. He had been reaching for the cookie jar, oatmeal raisin, still warm, when the world stuttered. When heartbeat, the kitchen was ordinary. The next, it was burning. Flames crawled up the floral curtains like bright orange ivy. The table was overturned, legs pointing skyward like a dead animal. His grandmother, Margaret, lay on the floor near the stove, silver hair fanned out in a halo, a thin ribbon of blood trickling from her temple. A skillet rested inches from her open hand, still smoking. And in the doorway stood Elias himself, olden, taller, face streaked with soot and tears, screaming her name over and over until his voice cracked into silence. Then the vision snapped shut like a slammed book. Elias dropped the cookie jar. It shattered across the floor in a spray of crumbs and glass. Margaret turned from the stove, wiping hands on her apron. "Lord, child, you look like you've seen a ghost." He couldn't speak. His tongue felt thick and useless. All he could do was stare at the curtains, still blue and white gingham, still hanging peacefully, and at his grandmother's unblemished forehead. That night he didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the narrow guest bed, knees drawn to his chest, listening to the house sitter and creak. Every time he closed his eyes, the fire came back. Every time he opened them, the room was dark and safe and wrong. He told no one. The visions came irregularly after that, never on command, always uninvited. A classmate's car accident 3 weeks before prom. A neighbor's heart attack in the middle of mowing the lawn. A girl he liked in 11th grade walking out of a party and never coming home. Each glimpse was sharp, merciless, cinematic. And each time Elias tried to act, warning someone, changing a plan, even once physically dragging a friend away from a motorcycle ride, the outcome twisted in ways he could never have predicted. The classmate crashed anyway, different road, different night, same broken neck. The neighbor survived the heart attack, but his teenage son, left alone too long while the ambulance took forever, overdosed in the empty house. The girl from 11th grade lived, but her best friend, trying to find her after Elias pulled her from the party, was hit by a drunk driver on the way home. Every intervention bathed a new tragedy, as though the universe kept meticulous balance sheets and refused to accept red ink. By Elias had learned the only reliable way to survive: silence. He moved to the city, Philadelphia first, then New York, finally settling in Brooklyn where the windows rattled every time the J train passed. He worked freelance as a medical transcriptionist, typing up surgeons' dictations in the small hours when the world felt furthest away. He rarely left the apartment except to buy groceries or collect packages. He had no social media, no close friends, no lovers. He kept his life small enough that the future had less material to work with. Until Mara. She moved into the apartment across the hall in early March. Elias noticed her the way one notices weather, first as background noise, then as something impossible to ignore. She sang while she cooked, and fearless. She laughed at her own jokes. She left the hallway light on for her elderly cat, even though the building super threatened to find her. Once, when Elias was coming home at 3 in the morning with 2 bags of frozen dinners, she stepped out to take out the trash and caught him in the act of balancing both bags on one knee while trying to unlock his door. "Here," she said, and took one bag without asking. He froze. People didn't do that. Not anymore. "Thanks," he muttered, barely audible. She smiled, small, crooked, the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly how much effort the word had cost him. "I'm Mara. 4B. Elias. 4A. Nice to meet you, Elias 4A. She didn't linger. She simply carried his bag inside his door, set it on the counter, and left again, humming something that sounded suspiciously like a 90s pop song. That should have been the end of it. But 2 weeks later, on a Thursday evening when the sky was the color of tarnished silver, the vision came. He was washing dishes when it hit, sudden, violent, like being struck by lightning while standing in water. Mara, in a yellow raincoat, standing on the subway platform at rush hour. A man in a black hoodie pushing through the crowd too fast. A stumble. A scream. The sickening lurch of bodies pressed against the yellow line. Then the train, silver, indifferent, swallowing everything. Mara's yellow raincoat fluttering down onto the tracks like a broken wing. Elias dropped the plate. It cracked neatly in two against the sink bottom. He stood there, breathing hard, suds dripping from his wrists. The vision looped twice more, mercilessly detailed, the exact time on the platform clock, शाम के 7:42, the squeal of wet brakes, the flash of her phone screen as it fell from her hand, showing a text she'd been typing to someone named Jules. He looked at the clock on the microwave. 6:58. Minutes. He could stay inside. Lock the door. Turn off the light. Pretend the vision belonged to someone else. But he already knew he wouldn't. He grabbed his coat. Elias took the stairs two at a time, coat, hot hammering against his ribs like it wanted out. The lobby smelled of wet concrete and yesterday's takeout. He pushed through the front door into a cold, spitting rain that immediately soaked the shoulders of his jacket. Was 12 minutes away on the J train if he caught the right one. He had minutes left. He ran. The sidewalks were crowded with people who had already decided the day was over, umbrellas tilted forward like black shields, heads down, phones glowing and hoods. Elias wove between them, breath coming in short, painful bursts. He hadn't run like this since high school track, and even then he'd hated it. The station entrance yawned ahead, stairs slick and gleaming and then sodium light. He took them fast, nearly slipping on the third step from the bottom. The token booth clerk didn't look up from her phone. Elias slapped his against the turnstile and shoved through. Platform level. 7:19. The digital clock above the tracks read 7:19. Minutes. He scanned the crowd. No yellow raincoat yet. Just the usual crash, suits, scrubs, delivery drivers in vests, teenagers with enormous backpacks. The air was thick with damp wool, fried food, and the faint electric smell of the third rail. Elias moved toward the side, where the vision had placed her. He kept his hands shoved deep in his pockets so no one would see them shaking. He told himself he didn't have to speak to her. Just get close. Watch. If the man in the hoodie appeared, he could create a distraction, knock over a trash can, shout something about a rat, anything to slow the momentum of the crowd. He didn't have to change the future. He just had to delay it. A train roared into the station on the opposite track, brakes shrieking. The wind it pushed ahead smelled of hot methane and ozone. Elias flinched. Every sound felt amplified, every face too vivid. Then he saw her. Mara stepped onto the platform from the stairwell at the far end, hood up against the drizzle that had followed everyone down. The yellow raincoat was unmistakable, bright as a traffic cone, the exact shade from the vision. She carried a canvas tote slung over one shoulder, nodding faintly to whatever music she was listening to. 7:24. 18 minutes. Elias started moving toward her, trying to look casual, like someone just waiting for the same train. His pulse thundered in his ears. He rehearsed the words in his head, "Hey, Mara, funny running into you. Want to grab coffee instead? The next train's always late anyway." Simple. Innocent. Safe. He was 10 feet away when the man appeared. Not the hoodie from the vision, this one wore a navy windbreaker, reflective stripes on the sleeves, the kind of jacket where house workers or bike messengers wore. He was pushing a loaded dolly stacked with 3 large cardboard boxes, wheels ratting over the uneven tiles. He was in a hurry, shoulders hunched, muttering under his breath. The crowd parted for him grudgingly. Mara didn't see him. She was looking down at her phone, thumbs moving. Elias's stomach dropped. This was it. Different man, different moment, same physics. The dolly would clip her ankle or catch her heel. She'd stumble. The crowd would surge forward as the train arrived. The yellow raincoat would go over the edge. He didn't think. He just moved. Hey! Elias shouted, voice cracking. Watch the cart. Several heads turned. The man with the dolly slowed, confused. Mara looked up, started, popping out of one ear. Elias closed the distance in 3 long strides, grabbed her elbow, not hard, just enough to pull her back a step, and pointed at the dolly. He almost ran you over. Mara blinked at him, then at the man, who had stopped completely now and was raising both hands in apology. Shit, sorry, the man said. Didn't see you. It's fine, Mara said automatically, but her eyes were on Elias. Recognition flickered. Wait, you're the guy from 4A. Yeah. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, too high, too fast. Elias. She tilted her head. You just saved me from a rogue hand truck? Yeah. It looked like it was going to clip you. The man with the dolly muttered another apology and trundled away toward the elevator. The platform crowd receded, the moment already dissolving. Mara studied Elias for a long second. Raindrops sparkled on the shoulders of her coat like tiny diamonds. You're shaking, she said quietly. He looked down. His hands were trembling so hard the fingers blurred. I'm cold, he lied. She didn't believe him. He could see it in the slight narrowing of her eyes. But she didn't press. The train screamed into the station, doors hissing open. People surged forward. Mara glanced at the open doors, then back at him. You going this way? He should say no. He should turn around, walk home, let the rest of the night unfold without him in it. Instead he nodded. They stepped onto the train together. The car was crowded but not suffocating. They found space near the center pole. Mara leaned against it, Elias stood beside her, one hand gripping the overhead bar so tightly his knuckles ached. For a while neither spoke. The train rattled through the tunnel, lights flickering. Rain streaked the windows in long silver threads. Finally Mara pulled out one and offered it to him. Want to hear what I'm listening to? It's embarrassingly cheerful. He hesitated, then took it. The song was something upbeat and jangly, early 2000s indie pop, all and major chords. It felt obscene after what he'd just seen in his head. Thanks, he said. She smiled that crooked smile again. You don't talk much, do you? Not really. That's okay. I talk enough for 2 people. He almost left, almost. Instead he asked, where are you headed? Meeting a friend at a bar in Bushwick. She just got engaged. Apparently there's champagne and crying involved. You? Nowhere, he admitted. Just riding. She raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. The train lurched around a curve. Their shoulders brushed. Elias felt the moment stretch thin and fragile. He could get off at the next stop. Disappear back into his quiet life. Let her go to her champagne and crying without him attached to the story. But the vision had already shifted once. He didn't know what the new version looked like. He didn't know if getting on this train had saved her or only postponed the bill. He stayed. They rode in companionable silence for 3 more stops. Mara hummed along to the music. Elias watched the stations flash by, Lorimer, Flushing, Merta, and tried to convince himself the worst was over. Then the train slowed for Jefferson Street. Mara straightened. This is me. She handed him back Their fingers touched for half a second, warm against his cold skin. Thanks for the rescue, Elias Char-A, she said. And for the company. He managed a small nod. Be careful. She laughed softly. I'm always careful. The doors opened. She stepped out. Elias watched her yellow raincoat disappear into the crowd on the platform, swallowed by the evening. He stayed on the train. It pulled away, gathering speed, carrying him deeper into Brooklyn while the vision in his mind replayed itself on a cruel loop, not the subway platform anymore, but something new, something darker. A narrow street after midnight. A yellow raincoat. Headlights too fast. A sickening crunch of metal and bone. The train doors closed behind Mara with a pneumatic sigh, and Elias felt the sudden absence of her like a missing tooth, sharp, surprising, impossible to ignore. He stayed standing, gripping the overhead bar until his palm ached. The car swayed through the tunnel, lights stuttering overhead. Faces blurred past in reflection, tired, indifferent. None of them knew what he had just seen. The new vision had settled into him the moment the doors shut, heavy as wet cement. It didn't replay the old subway fall. Instead it showed a narrow side street in Bushwick, sodium street lamps casting long orange shadows. Subah ke 1:17 according to the glowing sign of a shuttered bodega. Mara walking alone, yellow raincoat zipped to her chin, head down against a fresh wind. Headlights flaring sudden and too fast from the cross street. A black SUV, tires hissing on wet asphalt. No time to scream. The crunch when met body was the worst part, wet, final, intimate. Then silence. Then the rain falling hardened, washing blood toward the gutter. Elias pressed his forehead against the cool metal pole and closed his eyes. He had minutes, maybe 50, before she would leave the bar. If he got off at the next stop, walked back toward Jefferson, he might intercept her. Warn her. Tell her to take an Uber. Tell her anything. But he knew better now. Every time he acted, the universe simply rewrote the script. The death stayed. Only the method changed. The actors changed. The grief changed hands. Still, he got off at Morgan Avenue. The rain had thickened into a steady sheet by the time he reached street level. He turned up the collar of his coat, useless against the cold, and started walking toward the bar Mara had mentioned. She hadn't named it, but Bushwick bars after work engagements were predictable. There were only 3 likely candidates within a radius of the station. He chose the first when he came to a low brick building with neon spelling "U" the broken anchor in red and blue. A chalkboard sign outside advertised "O champagne for newly engaged idiot." It seemed right. Inside the bar was warm, dimly lit, loud with laughter and clinking glasses. A small crowd had gathered around a long table near the back, women in glittering dresses, men loosening ties, bottles of sweating on the wood. In the middle of it all sat a young woman holding up her left hand, diamond catching the light like a tiny lighthouse. Beside her, laughing and pouring more champagne, was Mara. She had taken off the yellow raincoat, it hung over the back of her chair like a shed skin. Her dark hair was damp from the walk, curling at the temples. She looked happy and complicated and guarded. For a second Elias hated himself for bringing the shadow into this room. He stayed near the door, by a coat rack. He could leave now. Let the night play out. Let whatever was coming come. But his feet wouldn't move. Mara glanced toward the entrance, maybe feeling watched, and their eyes met across the crowded space. She tilted her head, surprised, then smiled that crooked smile and raised her glass in a small, private toast. She said something to the woman beside her, stood, and started weaving through the tables toward him. Elias felt the panic rise in his throat like bile. "Hey, Stucker," she said when she reached him, was teasing but eyes curious. "You following me now?" He swallowed. "I was in the neighborhood. She studied him. You're so. And you look like you've seen a murder. Close enough. Calm sit, she said. At least dry off. Jules won't mind. She didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked back, expecting him to follow. He did. The table was a riot of color and noise. Jules, the newly engaged man, beamed at him like he was an old friend. Someone pressed a glass of champagne into his hand. He held it without drinking, the bubbles rising like tiny accusations. Mara slid into the chair beside him. You don't have to talk, she murmured, leaning close so only he could hear. Just stay. It's nice having someone here who isn't screaming about centerpieces. He managed a thin smile. The night moved around them in bright fragments. Toasts. Strees. A terrible rendition of A Sweet Caroline from the jukebox. Mara left easily, touched arms, leaned into hugs. She was the center of the room without trying to be. Elias watched her like someone studying a painting he knew would be taken away. Around subah ke 12:40 people started drifting toward coats and Ubers. Jules hugged Mara fiercely. You're walking home, right? Promise me you'll text when you're safe. Promise, Mara said, kissing her cheek. Elias felt the clock ticking inside his ribs. Outside, the rain had eased to a fine mist. Streetlights reflected in shallow puddles. Mara zipped up the yellow raincoat and turned to him. You heading back to the J? She asked. Yeah. Me too. Walk with me. He nodded, throat too tight for words. They started down the sidewalk, shoulders almost touching. The city hummed around them, distant sirens, the low thump of bass from a basement club, tires hissing on wet asphalt. After 2 blocks Mara spoke. You've been weirdly quiet. Even for you. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just tell me what's wrong. You look like you're carrying a bomb. He stopped walking. She stopped too, turning to face him. The street lamp above painted half her face gold, half shadow. I saw something, he said. The words came out cracked. I see things. Before they happen. Mara's expression didn't change to disbelief or mockery. She simply waited. Tonight, he went on, I saw you on the subway platform. You were going to fall. I stopped it. But then I saw something else. Later. A car. You. The street. And I. He couldn't finish. Mara looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could smell rain and her faint citrus shampoo. You're telling me you can see the future? Yes. And you think you're going to get me killed? I think trying to save you might be what gets you killed. She exhaled through her nose, a small, almost amused sound. That's a hell of a pickup line, Elias. It's not. I know. She touched his sleeve, light, steady. I believe you. He stared at her. You do. I've met a lot of liars. You're not lying. You're terrified. She glanced down the empty street. So what do we do? If every move you make makes it worse. I don't know, he admitted. I've never known. Mara looked back at him. Then maybe we stop moving. What? Let's just stand here. Right here. For a while. No walking. No trains. No trying to fix anything. Just be still. He searched her face for a joke. There wasn't one. She took his hand, cold fingers into his golden veins, and they stood in the middle of the sidewalk under the street lamp while the city moved around them like water around stones. For almost 10 minutes they didn't speak. Cars passed. A delivery scooter buzzed by. Somewhere nearby a dog barked once, sharp and lonely. Then Mara squeezed his hand. Time check. He glanced at his watch. सुबह के 1:03. The vision had said 1:17. 14 minutes left. She looked at him, eyes steady. Still want to walk me home? He nodded. They started walking again, slowly, deliberately. No rush. No destination. Just one foot in front of the other through the wet night. At 1:16 they turned onto her block. At 1:17 they were still walking. No headlights. No screech of tires. No crunch. Just the soft patter of drizzle and the quiet scrape of their shoes on the sidewalk. Mara stopped in front of their building. She looked up at the windows, dark except for the hallway light she always left on for the cat. Well, she said softly. We're still here. Elias felt something loosen inside his chest, something that had been knotted for years. For now, he said. She smiled, small and real. For now is enough. They climbed the stairs together. At the landing between the third and fourth floors she paused. Elias? Yeah. Thank you. For trying. Even when it hurts. He couldn't answer. He only nodded. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, brief, warm, starting. Then she continued up the stairs, yellow raincoat shining under the dim bulbs. He watched her until the door of 4B closed behind her with a gentle click. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the future stayed quiet. The next morning arrived grey and ordinary, the kind of January Saturday that made Brooklyn feel smaller than it was. Elias woke to the sound of rain tapping the fire escape like impatient fingers. His apartment smelled of yesterday's coffee and the faint ghost of damp wool. For the first time in years, he didn't wake up already braced for disaster. He lay there listening to the building breathe, pipes clanking, distant doors closing, the low rumble of the J train passing beneath the street. No visions. No sudden stutters of time. Just quiet. He got up, made coffee in the chipped blue mug he'd had since college, and stood at the window watching water streak the glass. Across the hall, behind the door of 4B, Mara was probably awake. Maybe feeding the cat. Maybe humming again. He didn't knock. Not yet. Instead he sat at his small table with his laptop, opened a blank document, and, after a long hesitation, began to type. He wrote down every vision he could remember. Dates. People. Outcomes. The ones he'd tried to stop. The ones he hadn't. The collateral damage that always followed. Page after page of clinical, terrible facts. When he finished, the document was 17 pages long and the coffee was cold. He sieved it as docs and closed the laptop. Around noon there was a soft knock. Mara stood in the doorway wearing an oversized sweater the color of oatmeal and mismatched socks, one stripe, one solid green. She held 2 paper bags from the bakery on the corner. Peace offering, she said. I wasn't sure if you were a bagel person or a croissant person, so I got both. Also coffee. Real coffee. Not the instant kind you probably drink. He stepped aside. I drink instant. Tragic. We'll fix that. She came in without ceremony, set the bags on the counter, and started unpacking. The apartment suddenly felt smaller with her in it, brighter, warmer, more dangerous. You okay? She asked, glancing over her shoulder while she found mugs. I think so. She handed him a everything bagel wrapped in wax paper. You don't sound convinced. He took it. Their fingers brushed again. This time neither of them pulled away immediately. I wrote it all down, he said. Everything I've seen. Everything that's happened when I tried to change it. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. And it's a pattern. Every single time I intervene, someone else pees. Sometimes immediately. Sometimes later. But the ledger always balances. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, maybe the pattern isn't fate. Maybe it's guilt. He looked at her. You see the worst possible outcome, she continued, and you feel responsible for it. So you act. And when something bad happens anyway, or something worse, you blame yourself harder. It's a loop. Not destiny. Just you punishing yourself. He wanted to argue. He wanted to show her the scars, the years of proof. Instead he said, then why did nothing happen last night? Because we stopped playing the game. She shrugged. We stood still. We didn't run toward the fire or away from it. We just existed in the same place at the same time. And the future didn't know what to do with that. He stared at the bagel in his hand like it might hold an answer. Eat, she said gently. Then we'll figure out the rest. They ate standing up, leaning against opposite counters, the rain drumming a steady rhythm outside. She told him about the cat, named Toast, because he was black and had once sat directly on a hot toaster, and about Jules's wedding planning drama. He told her almost nothing. But he listened. Really listened. And for once the silence between sentences didn't feel like failure. Later, when the coffee was gone and the rain had eased to a drizzle, Mara said, I have an idea. He raised an eyebrow. Let's test it. Test what? The stillness theory. She smiled, small, mischievous. Come with me somewhere. No plan. No destination. We just walk. If something tries to happen, we stop. We wait it out. Together. He should have said no. Every instinct screamed it. Instead he grabbed his coat. They walked for hours. Through Williamsburg, past warehouses and new-glass condos. Across the bridge into Manhattan, wind whipping their faces until their cheeks burned. Down into the West Village, where the streets turned crooked and the buildings leaned like old friends sharing secret. They didn't speak much. Sometimes their hands brushed. Sometimes they walked so close their sleeves caught on each other. No visions came. No cars swerved. No scaffolding collapsed. No stranger pulled a knife. Just the city doing what cities do, breathing, moving, indifferent. Around dusk they found themselves in Washington Square Park. The arch glowed against the deepening blue. Street musicians played jazz under the lamps. A group of college kids laughed too loud near the fountain. Mara stopped under one of the old sycamores, leaves still clinging despite the season. See, she said. Nothing. Elias looked around. The world felt dangerously soft. That's what scares me, he admitted. When it's quiet, I start waiting for the other shoe. She reached up and touched the side of his face, light, careful, like she was handling something fragile. Then let's keep making it quiet. They kissed under the tree while the park span slowly around them. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was simply two people choosing each other in the same breath. When they pulled apart, her eyes were bright and his were wet. They walked home slowly, fingers laced together now, no longer pretending it was accident. That night, in the narrow hallway outside their doors, Mara paused. Stay, she said. Not a question. He did. They didn't rush. They sat on her couch with toast curled between them, watching the rain streak the windows. She read aloud from a worn paperback of poetry. He listened. When the book fell closed, they kissed again, longer, slower, like people learning a new language. Later, in the dark of her bedroom, she traced the scars on his knuckles, old marks from years of clenched fists, and asked, Do you believe it's possible to live without the weight? He thought about it for a long time. I want to, he said finally. She kissed the pulse at his wrist. Then we will. For 3 weeks the quiet held. They cooked trouble dinners together. They watched old movies on her laptop. They walked the neighborhood at odd hours, hand in hand, daring the future to interrupt. And nothing did. Elias began to believe, cautiously, the way someone learns to trust ice on a frozen lake, that maybe the curse had always been his own making. Maybe seeing the future wasn't the same as owning it. Maybe letting go wasn't surrender, maybe it was the only way forward. Then, on a Tuesday in early February, the vision returned. It came without warning, while he was brushing his teeth. The bathroom light flickered once. The mirror showed not his own reflection, but Mara's, standing on the roof of their building, yellow raincoat flapping in high wind. Night time. City lights smeared below like spilt paint. She stepped backward. The low parapet caught her calves. She teetered. Then she fell. Elias spat toothpaste into the sink and gripped the porcelain until his arms shook. The vision repeated twice more, each time sharper. सुबह के 2:47, the exact spot near the water tower. The sound the wind made through the mat railing. The soft, surprised gasp she made as gravity wan. He stared at his reflection, pale, terrified. Across the hall, Mara was asleep. Safe. For now. The clock on his phone read रात के 11:19. 3 hours and minutes. He could wake her. Tell her. Keep her inside. Lock every door. But he knew, sickeningly certain, that if he did, the universe would find another way. Another roof. Another night. Another fall. He could do nothing. Let the hours pass. Hope the vision was wrong, or late, or someone else's life entirely. He could try to change it and destroy someone else in the process. Or he could do what they had practiced for weeks. He could be still. He could wait. He could trust her. Elias turned off the bathroom light, walked quietly across the hall, and let himself into Charby with the spare key she'd given him. Mara slept on her side, one arm flung over toast, breathing slow and even. He sat on the floor beside the bed and watched her. The minutes crawled. At 2:30 he stood. At 2:40 he walked to the window and looked up at the roofline against the bruised sky. At 2:46 he knelt beside her again, pressed his forehead to the edge of the mattress, and whispered, "I'm trying." At subah ke 2:47, nothing happened. No wind. No footsteps on the stairs. No scream swallowed by the night. Just the soft tick of the radiator and Mara's steady breathing. Elias stayed on the floor until dawn, knees aching, heart hammering, waiting for the other shoe that never fell. When the first grey light slipped undone the blinds, Mara stirred. She opened her eyes and found him there, still, silent, exhausted. Elias? Her voice was thick with sleep. What's wrong? He tried to speak. Couldn't. She sat up, reached down, pulled him onto the bed beside her. He let her hold him while the tears came, quiet at first, then shaking, years of fear spilling out in the safety of her arms. She didn't ask questions. She only held on. Outside, the city woke up slowly, indifferent as ever. And for the first time in his life, Elias Voss let the future arrive without trying to stop it. Spring came slowly to Brooklyn that year, the way it always does, reluctant, like someone who has been invited to a party but isn't sure they want to stay. By the cherry trees along the parkway had begun to open, pink blossoms drifting onto sidewalks and sticking to wet pavement. Elias watched them from the fire escape of Charby while Mara slept inside, one arm flung across the pillow he usually used. They had fallen into a rhythm that felt both miraculous and fragile. Mornings began with coffee made in her ancient percolator. Afternoons were spent wandering the neighborhood or sitting in silence while she graded papers for the community college art class she taught twice a week. Nights ended tangled together, the cat wedged between them like a small, warm Beordan guard. The visions had not returned. Not once. Elias still woke sometimes in the dark, heart racing, certain the quiet was only a pause before the next catastrophe. But Mara would stir beside him, murmur something unintelligible, and press her back against his chest. The panic would recede like a tide going out. He began to believe, really believe, that stillness might be the answer after all. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday in a plain white envelope with no return address. Mara found it slipped under the door when she came home from teaching. She called Elias over from across the hall, was oddly flat. The paper inside was thin, the handwriting careful and slanted. To the man who sees tomorrow. I know what you are. I've watched you for years. You think you've escaped, but the ledger is never closed. There is one that left unpaid. Meet me on the roof of your building tonight at raat ke 11 baje come alone. If you don't, the woman will pay the price you've spent so long trying to avoid. No police. No tricks. Just you. Someone who remembers Margaret. Elias read the words twice, then folded the paper with shaking fingers. Margaret. His grandmother. The kitchen fire. The skillet. The blood on the linoleum. He had never told anyone her name. Not even Mara. Mara watched his face. What is it? He handed her the letter without speaking. She read it slowly. When she finished, she looked up. You're not going. I have to. No. Her voice was still wrapped in velvet. You don't. This is the oldest trick in the book. Someone knows you're afraid, so they're using the past to pull you back into the game. But if they know about Margaret, anyone could have found that out. Old newspaper clipping. Obituary. Gossip. You're not invisible, Elias. You just think you are. He paced the narrow living room, toast watching from the couch with lazy interest. I can't risk you, he said. Not again. You're not risking me. You're risking us. She stepped in front of him, forcing him to stop. If you go up that night, you're choosing the vision again. You're choosing to believe the future still owns you. And the second you do that, it wins. He looked at her, really looked. The stubborn set of her mouth. The faint freckles across her nose that only appeared after too much sun. The way she stood with her weight on the balls of her feet, ready to fight or run or both. I'm scared, he admitted, was cracking. I know. She took both his hands. So am I, but we've spent months proving something. We proved that when we stop running toward disaster or away from it, the disaster sometimes forgets to show up. He closed his eyes. And if it doesn't forget tonight, then we face it together. She squeezed his fingers. No more going alone. No more trying to carry the weight by yourself. That's the deal we made, remember? He remembered. They spent the evening in quiet preparation, not for battle, but for waiting. Mara lit candles. Made tea. Played soft music on the ancient record player she'd found at a stoop sale. They sat on the floor with their backs against the couch, toast draped across both their laps, and talked about small, ordinary things, the new bakery opening on Knickerbocker, the stray dog that kept following joggers in the park, the way the light came through the blinds in stripes every morning. At 10:45 Elias stood. Mara stood with him. They climbed the stairs to the roof together. The door at the top was never locked, building code violation, everyone knew it, no one cared. Wind rushed in when they pushed it open, cold and smelling of coming rain. The roof was empty. No stranger waiting. No figure in shadow. Just the water tower looming black against the city glow, the low parapet, the scatter of cigarette butts and broken glass. They stood near the center, shoulders touching. 11 baje came and went. 11:05. 11:10. Nothing. Elias felt the tension bleeding out of him slowly, like air from a tire. At 11:17 Mara left, a small, incredulous sound. See, she said. They didn't even show. He didn't answer. He was looking at the low wall near the edge. In the vision that had haunted him for years, his olden self had stood there screaming Margaret's name while the kitchen burned below. He had always assumed the scream was grief. Now, standing on a different roof with a different woman beside him, he understood it might have been something else. Relief. Because even in the worst version of the story, the one where everything went wrong, he had still tried. He had still cared enough to break. Mara slipped her hand into his. Ready to go back down? She asked. Yeah. They walked to the door together. Halfway down the stairs, Elias stopped. Wait. She turned. He took a breath. I want to tell you something. She waited. I love you, he said. Simple. No flourish. Just the truth, spoken into the dim stairwell. Mara's eyes went wide, then soft. She stepped up one step so they were level. I love you too, she said. I've loved you since you nearly broke your neck trying to carry 2 bags of frozen dinners up for flight. He laughed, started laughter, and kissed her there on the stairs, surrounded by peeling paint and the faint smell of old cigarette. They went inside. They locked the door. They went to bed. And the future, for once, arrived without teeth. It came in small, ordinary pieces, mornings where he woke before her and watched her sleep. Evenings when she graded papers and he typed medical reports side by side. Walks through the park in April when the cherry blossoms fell like slow pink snow. Sometimes he still felt the old reflex, the urge to brace, to predict, to prevent. But each time, Mara would notice. She would take his hand. She would say quietly, we're still here. And they were. The ledger, it turned out, had never been about balance after all. It had been about choice. And for the first time in his life, Elias Voss chose to stop being.